Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll start shortly. I can see some people are filtering in. So we're about a minute early. We'll wait a minute and a half before we get started here. Pierre, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Alex. How are you?
Good. It's actually my birthday tomorrow.
25?
So yeah, I wish.
Yeah, shows.
As you can see the roster of attendees filling up. So just wait another 30 seconds or so, and then Pierre and I will get started. I see some new names, so that's great to see. See some familiar names, so that's also nice. Nice mix of people. Some of them are probably getting pretty sick and tired of you and I, Pierre. So we'll see.
See, maybe just one more year of our webinars. Check back in 2025.
You never know. Maybe there'll be some new on-screen talent one of these days. Okay, so it's 10:01, so let's get started here. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending the webinar today, In the Wild 2024. So it's all about preventing and mitigating the most common tactics and techniques. And I'll go into a few more things here. So I'm Alex McLaughlin. I'm the VP of Marketing here at D3. I'll be hosting this fine webinar today. Pretty typical when it comes to Q&A, but we definitely want to, be loose, encourage questions. So use the chat box or the question box. We'll pause it a few times throughout the presentation. Then there'll be a 10 or 15-minute Q&A session at the end. A recording will obviously be provided after the webinar as well. And our expert today is Pierre Noujeim. Pierre, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to share today some of the insights we found from our incident analysis. And so I've been working at D3 for a few years now. I started out on the client side, helping deploy SOAR into both enterprise and MSSP SOC teams. I'm advisor to the Canadian Cybersecurity Network, and I'm an incident response researcher here at D3. So I study tactics and techniques, some of the top threats our clients are facing, and then I help our internal team and then also the client teams build out their playbooks to respond to them.
Thanks, Pierre. So like I said before, Pierre is definitely the expert when it comes to incident response on this hosting duo today. So let's move on. So, a little bit about D3 before we get into the analysis and the data that we're showing today. So for those that, maybe aren't as familiar with D3, it's a comprehensive platform for SOC automation. We want you to process every alert in D3 so you can normalize and unify your alert data. This is how you eliminate noise, close false positives, and really create those high fidelity, high confidence incident records. So we want your team spending its time on real incidents, the critical work, instead of being sidetracked by the SOC noise. So our platform is really about providing automation so that you can focus on that critical work, the priority tasks. And that's what we're most proud about at D3 is letting analysts spend more time on real threats. So that's D3 Smart SOAR. And in the wild, so what was in the wild? So in the wild was our analysis, so D3 Labs analysis of 75,331 security incidents. These incidents occurred throughout last year, so from January 1 until December 31st, 2023. Primary sources were EDR, email security, SIM, network security. There were other sources, but the vast majority came from those tools. These alerts were all processed by D3 Smart SOAR on behalf of D3 Smart SOAR was used by our partners who participated in this research. So gave us a really nice data set to work from. And I did mention D3 Labs in the previous slide. So D3 Labs is something new for us. It's basically our skunkworks. So It's our internal team of some of the brightest folks we have at D3 from multiple disciplines, customer success, cyber engineering, incident response researchers, coming together to really push the envelope with respect to incident response innovation. So Pierre, I know this is something you're passionate about. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the things planned for D3 Labs?
Yeah, so we see an opportunity to create a more leading edge approach to incident response. And you'll see later on, we follow some specific recommendations depending on the attack pattern found. And so this is really what D3 Labs does, is we stay current around what kind of tactics, techniques, and procedures attackers are using. And then we leverage both our own environments and then also our partners' environments to help build out automated responses to them.
Yeah, in other words, there's tons of threat research groups out there, embedded in some of the threat intelligence companies, some of the services companies, and we really feel like there's an opening for a lab, a focus group that's really focused on the response, innovating on the response side. And so this in the wild analysis that we did in white paper that we published in April is really the first report that we published from within this group. So I'll just move on here. So why don't we get into some of the analysis? We'll summarize some of the data before we get into some of the more actionable items that Pierre's prepared in terms of playbooks, automations, that kind of thing. So Pierre, why don't you tell us a little bit about these incidents?
Sure. So I just wanted to give you a severity distribution here first. And this is pretty standard, what you'd expect. We didn't ignore anything. We saw on the low end information and critical severity threats, and then a lot of false positives. So this would be anything up to medium. Again, we analyzed all of them. We kept the data pretty high level to protect the integrity of, the end users within some of our partners' environments, and we just made sure we wanted to understand attack patterns, and then also working with our partners about what they were doing in order to isolate and contain these high and critical severity threats.
We've actually got our first question. I'll wait for that one. Actually, it goes sort of, it is part of another talking point we have. So it's great to see questions flowing in. Definitely want to encourage more questions. Yeah, it's great to have early questions. So we'll address that shortly. Why don't you talk about some of the tactics and techniques that we saw here?
Yeah, so what was surprising was we saw execution up at the top. So this kind of tells us that the attackers, at least in this data set, had already gained access to the network. Some of the initial access and persistence techniques were seen lower down on this table. But this just emphasizes the importance of having your proper EDR in place to be monitoring your endpoints. And then obviously, if you can take actions on that endpoint remotely, that helps a lot on the response side. In terms of initial access, it's valid, pretty consistent stuff that we're seeing across the board. So attempts with phishing and spear phishing, and then also the manipulation of account credentials, both valid and then also through tactics like brute force and spray and pray.
Pierre, what was the biggest weakness you found in current security defenses?
I would say broadly, it's the isolation of detection and response to the specific tool that that usually created the alert. And so customers and security teams are typically unable to piece together related alerts from different platforms. And that just means that these incidents that we're seeing are more isolated. So this execution incident may not be linked to its appropriate initial access incident or incidents. And so by starting to integrate them into a platform like a SOAR tool, that would be kind of our larger long-term goal, which is create a more holistic view of each incident.
Right. So in other words, go from many low fidelity alerts to few high fidelity incidents,
That's
right?
right.
I'll move on here. So, I know you isolated some key findings here. There was three of them. Why don't you walk us through those key findings?
Yeah, so the first one is that there were very few incidents that were unknown. So the detection tools are doing a great job of tagging them with an appropriate tactic or technique, which means that adversaries are not innovating too much beyond what we're seeing on the attack side. This is for the majority of cases. There are obviously some cases where we're seeing really novel techniques, but for the most part, if you invest in the basics, you'll protect yourself from some of the most common vectors.
I'll move on to the next one. So key finding number two.
Yes, this is addressing our the command and scripting interpreter technique, the one that we saw the most frequently. And so this is just making sure you're having proper process monitoring in place, usually done with an EDR, and then also having the capability to terminate that process swiftly. So you can have like a human in the loop process with this, or you can just do it at the click of a button.
And the third finding?
And this is, we hear about this all the time. So proper hygiene for account and device management, access to these assets, tactics involving valid accounts and compromised devices. It just means that, make sure your least privilege is applied, your multi-factor authentication is in place, your rotating keys, your rotating passwords is needed. So yeah, just again, the basics here are important. Make sure you're monitoring access to your accounts and devices.
I've got a question about the unknown threats that you mentioned. So you said there was a few threats that were unknown, and I know I'm putting you on the spot a bit here. It's not something we discussed previously, but I do know this was a question that a journalist at Dark Reading was interested in when they engaged with us about this report and covered it a little bit on Dark Reading's website. Do you have any information you can share about those unknown threats?
A lot of them require more analysis. Like, for example, it could be someone executed a particular script that we hadn't seen before, and they're therefore unsure about what kind of the end goal for that was, and therefore couldn't tag it. So
Good.
it's yeah, it's on the more novel side that it's typically tagged as unknown.
Yeah, I think that's definitely could be the basis for some additional analysis
Yeah.
is zeroing in on those unknown threats, because I mean that's interesting to a lot of people. So on the topic of unknown threats, how does our SOAR platform handle 0-day threats? This is a question that's come up.
0-day threats, it'd be nice to have a silver bullet for them. I would say SOARs or D3 in particular, how it assists with 0 days is the ability to manually create incidents and then trigger workflows that you just have in your kind of utility belt. So by identifying what kind of a threat it is, if it's a public facing, if it's a bug on an application, if it's a compromised account, being able to come in and say, okay, we got a new incident, no detection tool has tagged it. We're going to create it inside of D3 and we're going to handle it in D3 entirely. We're going to run our endpoint lockdown workflow. We're going to start initiate a scan on these devices, and then we're going to sever any connections from them outside of the network. So it gives you the flexibility to create incidents all on your own, and you can decide which kind of workflows we want to run in order to assess the scope of it or lock it down or notify colleagues or partners that they may have been impacted. You can create workflows for any of these scenarios. So I would say having these kinds of workflows that you'll need to trigger out of your back pocket in like on the side and ready to go would be really important for these scenarios where something just hasn't been seen before. But D3 gives you the option to just create that incident and then trigger a workflow to respond to it.
Great. I just have another question that came in, and we'll address this, and then we'll move on. So, does your platform use threat intel to enrich the information about the threats, Pierre?
Yeah. So D3 is a SOAR tool exclusively. However, it integrates with any threat intelligence database you can think of. So our customers, yes, that's the first thing that they do is when the alert comes in, they normalize it, they extract the IOCs, and then they enrich what they can, either with internal information or with threat intelligence tools. All of that threat intelligence is typically organized and then displayed to the investigation team so that they can open the incident, they can see the IOCs, and they can see the enriched information, and then they can use that to decide how they want to address this incident.
Great. And, we do have really close relationships with a full range of threat intelligence providers out there. And it's a really rich and diverse group of threat intelligence, within our customer base. So it's definitely a use case that we work with, very often, almost in every single account that we have. So let's move on. Pierre, definitely want to continue encouraging questions. It's great that we're getting all these early. Really like that. So you and others did the analysis, came out with some recommendations. So why don't you go through those, Pierre?
Yeah, so these recommendations we wanted to kind of give so you knew how to best use this report. So the first one is continuous evaluation and gap analysis of your incident response and detection capabilities. So the top 10 techniques that we identified here, you can use these as kind of your goal. So we want to make sure we have proper detection and response in place for each of these techniques. Now that you have those, then you can start to look at recommendation number 2 and figure out where are my opportunities to automate. So let's say for command and scripting interpreter, you decide that you want to have monitoring in place, you want to have automatic termination, and then you also want to reset the user account. Do you have a process in place to do that right now? And if not, this is an opportunity for automation. Some other low-hanging fruit with automation is like the threat intelligence enrichment that I recommended, and then also correlation. So looking for similar incidents that have happened in the last week, month, you name it, that are associated with the same users or devices. These can be incredibly insightful to correlate together once those alerts are ingested into the SOAR system. And then the third one is to adopt and integrate the MITRE Defend framework. So we'll talk quite a bit about this later on in this presentation, but security teams should definitely consider integrating the Defend framework because, again, this is an attack-based report. And we're finding that teams aren't really utilizing Defend very much, mainly because it's difficult to implement it consistently, and it also looks different depending on the environment, depending on the tools and the types of threats you're seeing. However, we think this is kind of an overlooked opportunity now that SOAR is becoming more pervasive within security teams. We're looking at how can we best use this systematized approach to incident response, and Defend is kind of coming to light as one of the ways to do that.
Great, thanks, Pierre. So our In the Wild report, I touched on it earlier. It's unique because we're talking about the incident response. So Pierre, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we didn't want to just give a threat report. We also wanted to offer recommendations for how to address them. And so that's what I think is unique about this report is that we provide incident response playbooks following best practices for each of these techniques that we identified. And we're doing something new in this space, which is we're modeling them after Defend recommendations. And this is the unique this is the kind of a unique way that you can use the SOAR playbook builder because each of these playbooks is going to be consistent when you attach it to a new instance. It's going to be following the same process as long as you haven't changed it. It gives you the opportunity to model it after a framework like Defend. And so if your attack identification is following the MITRE matrix, then your response can follow its counterpart, which is Defend here. And so we're going to walk through an example of this later on. But I guess just to summarize, what's unique about this is the Defend-based incident response playbooks to each of the common techniques identified.
Great. And could you also follow customized frameworks?
Of course, yeah. There's no limit to the kind of framework that you can, model a SOAR playbook after, and you don't have to follow any framework. I mean, a lot of security teams might want their own completely bespoke processes, which is how SOAR is used today, and which is expected. But yeah, like you mentioned with D3 Labs, we really want to try and push and see what the best could be. And so we're modeling after Defend right now, and we're testing that internally and sharing it with the community now to see what they think too.
Right, right. Okay, that's great. I know we talked a bit about it, Defend, on the first slide. Anything here you want to touch on before I move on quickly?
I would just say, yeah, it has 5 specific stages: harden, detect, isolate, deceive, and evict. For incident responders, they'd likely be most interested in the latter 3 stages, so which is what we've built our playbooks to assist and automate. And restore as well at the end. Harden and detect, well, detect for sure is typically done in a SIM or any kind of log detection analytics tool. And Harden SOAR can assist with that, but our SOAR playbooks we're working on the latter stages. So once a threat is identified, how do we respond to it?
Okay, thanks, Pierre. Just got a few questions. Actually, I'll let you address the next few slides, and we'll have a nice big solid Q&A session at the end. There's lots of questions to go through, so that's fantastic. So here you go, Pierre. Here's your first slide about the brute force attack. So I'll let you take it away.
Sure. So what we wanted to do near the tail end of this webinar is give a specific example of a defend-focused incident response playbook. So one of the techniques that we identified that we saw quite frequently were brute force attacks. And so Defend's recommendation is network traffic filtering. Some tools you can use to accomplish this are CrowdStrike, so a common EDR, VirusTotal for threat intelligence, and then your firewall. In this case, we're using FortiGate. And what this workflow does is first it executes a command with CrowdStrike. And what this is searching CrowdStrike for any active TCP connections from devices within our network. Then we're using a utility command from D3 to parse out all of the external IPs. This is a command available to our customers out of the box. For any of those external IPs, we're enriching it with threat intelligence. And then you can have a score that you're looking for in which to block the IPs. And so that can be automated as well with your FortiGate next generation firewall integration. And the purpose of this workflow is to restrict the incoming and outgoing traffic from your suspicious endpoint. So once a brute force attack is identified, you can trigger this isolation workflow to sever any connection to suspicious devices outside of your network.
Thanks, Pierre. Move on to the next slide here. So deceive.
Yeah, so the deception stage is interesting. Defend recommends deploying decoy user credentials. And so what this means is we want to create an account and assign them to a benign group in order to deceive the attackers. And we are going to use Microsoft Entra ID for this workflow, and also 2 different playbook engines within D3. So the first is the incident response playbook engine, and then the second is the scheduled playbook engine. So the incident response playbook engine, once an alert is created and an incident is created, the incident response playbook runs. So this is the deceive workflow that you see there. We're creating a user and we're adding the user to a new group. So this will typically be connected to like an isolation workflow that you saw on the previous slide. And at the same time, we can run this scheduled workflow, which is monitoring logins. So once that account is created, we can create this workflow that gets user activity logs, specifically sign-in logs. And if an attempt is detected or successful login is detected, whatever parameters you want to set here, you can create an incident inside of D3 and you can notify our security team that, okay, there's some suspicious activity on this honeypot account and we need to address it. So that's kind of how D3 kind of uniquely enables this deception piece, as you can do both the implementation and also the monitoring with scheduled workflows.
Great, thanks, Pierre. Go ahead with the evict recommendation.
So on the eviction side, this is quite straightforward, but Defend recommends invalidating your authentication cache and revoking credentials. So this is pretty easily done and with standard Entra ID integration commands, particularly two, which is revoking user sign-in sessions. So this resets the user's access across devices and applications. And you can also force a password reset. And then obviously they'll be prompted to create a new password upon their next login. So this one is quite straightforward. And typically what we see is these kinds of eviction workflows, these are manually triggered. So once the incident is created, then it goes through kind of like a verification stage. So where we use automation to give the investigation team all the information they need, and then they can determine, do we want to move forward with eviction, with these kinds of more these harder actions.
Thanks, Pierre. I've got a few questions about playbooks. So, to clarify, what you're seeing in the bottom of the screen here are, excerpts from our playbook engine, from our playbook editor. And so there are questions, Pierre, about can you describe what it's like to build a playbook like this, and then also, do we have a playbook library with playbooks inside that can be leveraged easily? So there's questions about both those two things.
Sure, yeah, we do have a playbook library. However, I will caveat that with once you start to run automation in your environment, you're going to find unique needs that you and your team has. And so you're going to want to be modifying these out of the box playbooks. And so, yeah, if you're looking for a SOAR tool, it's good to have workflows to kind of model things after. But just be aware that you're going to want to adapt them to your particular requirements. And then how are these playbooks developed? Well, first you need to integrate with your existing tools. So you can, depending on the tool, it requires specific authentication. You can set that up within the tool, make sure that the connection is active. And then within the playbook editor, it's a matter of dragging and dropping those integrations commands into a workflow like you see here. And you can branch these off. So we have kind of single stream workflows here, but you can also do multi-stream where different rows of actions are being triggered at the same time. We see that a lot. You can do things like playbook, like trigger-based playbooks. So when a change is made to the incident, you can trigger a new workflow. When a new alert is correlated to the incident, you can trigger a new workflow. So there are a lot of possibilities in terms of playbook building.
Can you, I think for everybody's benefit, can you clarify what a scheduled playbook can be used for?
Sure. So scheduled playbooks we've seen are typically used for monitoring and also automating kind of regular security exercises like phishing training and awareness, vulnerability assessments, and then also things like SBOM analysis, where you may be needing to analyze new inputs every month, see if there are any changes, and then update your vendors with the latest recommendations.
Great, thanks, Pierre.
Worries.
So I'm going to go to your takeaways. So 3 key takeaways, and then we have, almost 10 questions to get to. So that's great.
So we wanted to keep these takeaways to be pretty actionable and memorable based on this report and from an automation point of view. And so the first is invest in the basics. As we saw, our top 2 techniques were command and scripting interpreter and then phishing. So this just means that make sure you have your baseline activities monitored on your endpoints. Any anomalous behavior can be detected and then either terminated or verified quickly. And then make sure your authentication hygiene is on point across the board. So you have MFA, you have rotating passwords, you have VPNs where needed, and that should cover you for most of the cases. Number 2, when deploying automation, aim for the low-hanging fruit. So you may think that this is a big project, a big undertaking, but we find so much value can be derived just from making sure that your enrichment is taken care of and your analysts are guided through the incident response process. So when an alert comes in, it's normalized, it's enriched, And then they're given the option, is this a true positive? Is this a false positive? They can determine that. And then if it's a true positive, use some of the workflows that you saw in this webinar, and then also in the report in terms of isolating and recovering from that threat. And then the third one is SOAR is an opportunity to use defend at scale. Again, defend is very underutilized in the community, and we think SOAR is an opportunity to operationalize it. So this is what we're speaking about in this webinar.
I think it's important to underline the fact, you bring up low-hanging fruit. And when I hear low-hanging fruit, I start thinking about, early or quick ROI. And ROI is so important. I know some security teams are having smaller budgets, and smaller budgets require smarter spend. And a product like SOAR is perfect for security teams who are needing to get more from their tool, more from their staff, while keeping their staff happy and engaged. SOAR is a tool that does wonders in delivering return, freeing up time, allowing you to focus on real threats. So I think it's a really critical technology for a security team to have that maybe their budget is staying the same, or their budget is going down. There's a lot of value within SOAR. So let's hit up some of these questions here. There's almost 10, like I said. So can D3 provide entity details associated with these TTPs?
It's a good question. That's not within the scope of our current report. We're considering it for our 2024 report. However, nothing's been confirmed yet.
And by entity details, are we referring to like attack groups?
Or like indicators of compromise, like hashes that were included in these incidents. IP addresses, things like that.
Okay, great. Can you explain the integration of your platform with IoT and OT threats?
Yeah, this is a great question. And in IoT and OT, we're seeing, it's still at the detection and monitoring stage, or kind of like asset mapping, that kind of thing. There's very little automated response. So I think where SOAR can assist with this is in consolidation again. So if you have a team that's responsible both for IT and OT, they may have a dozen different tools on the IT side, and I don't know how many different detection sources on the OT side. And an incident response platform that's vendor neutral can ingest all of those security alerts, and it can assist with your prioritization and your enrichment. So rather than addressing these alerts on their individual platform one by one and switching between all of them from the OT and the IT side, you can just do all of your incident management from a single place.
Thanks. How do you ensure that automation doesn't miss critical threats?
So this is a good question. I think that one of the ways that we do that is by recommending that our customers deploy like human in the loop response. I've mentioned this a little bit before, but I'm a big proponent of, setting up your analysts and your investigation team for success instead of automating them out of the process. And so what that means is make sure they're not spending time collecting information, parsing data, displaying it, or detailing it out in reports. All of that stuff should be automated and taken care of. So when an alert hits our system and an incident is created, the team responsible for classifying it is put in the best possible position in order to address it properly. And so that's by kind of augmenting humans with automation is how I would make sure that all your critical threats have eyes on.
How do you ensure playbooks stay current?
So this is what the D3 Labs team is working on. We're constantly monitoring for changes in the TTP patterns that we're seeing, and then also changes to vendors. So there are a lot of new security tools that are hitting the market, a lot of consolidation going on, changes in capabilities. And so we take all of that into account when we're building out these playbooks. And but I think the most important thing is, what's relevant and what's working. And so we're super lucky to have some, generous and constructive partners that help in this program. And because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our recommendations are usable and they're relevant. Again, our customers are both on the enterprise and the MSSP side. And so everything has got to be battle tested.
This question that I'm about to say wasn't asked, but I think it's a good segue and is a good natural question to ask after the one you just addressed. So you just addressed, how we ensure our playbooks stay current. Can you talk about our approach to integrations and where, people that may have used some legacy SOAR products, they're not happy with the way integrations were managed or the amount of time they have to spend on integrations, and how D3 is addressing that with what we call vendor maintained integrations.
Yeah, we do get a lot of complaints from customers with older source systems where integrations haven't been updated, or when changes happen either to their playbook engine or to the vendor's integration itself, the workflow breaks and they can't, it's difficult to get in touch with somebody to address it. So what we do is we take the responsibility for integration development, testing, maintenance, on our own internally. So we work hand in hand with our customers and our prospective clients who want to see what we can do, figuring out, what are the leading edge use cases for these tools, what is really need for comprehensive security automation platform. And we go in, we do all of the API research and the testing for our clients. They don't have to write a line of code or anything like that. We just work with them to make sure that what we put out is what they need. And then we're constantly in a feedback loop with our customers and monitoring changes on our own.
Yeah, and as far as I know, I mean, that's pretty unique among SOAR vendors is our ability to really take that integration maintenance burden off of security teams and put it on our team. We have the largest engineering team in SOAR, almost 100 people working just on SOAR. So we're well equipped to manage, perfect, scale up these integrations that are fully featured. It's really one of the things that we do best. Okay, I'll get back to some of the additional questions. How do you handle false positives?
So false positives can be done in one of two ways. One is semi-automatically. So this is where an alert comes into the platform, it's enriched, and then displayed to an analyst where they then classify it as a false positive. In that case, we assist with automating that data collection and presentation side. So they just have to open it, look at the artifacts, and then look at the context and then make the decision. The other way is you can automatically dismiss it on ingestion. So we have a third playbook engine. I mentioned the incident playbook and then the scheduled playbook. The third one would be the event playbook. So the event playbook is a workflow that runs on ingestion. So before an alert is escalated into an incident, when that alert is initially ingested, you can also build incident response workflows at that level. So at that level, we typically see workflows for deduplication, bidirectional sync with like your SIM or your ITSM, correlation, and then also this false positive classification. So if you have one of these workflows built out, you can ingest an alert through it, classify it as false positive, and then just close it out before it becomes an incident.
One of the earlier questions was if the SOAR platform, so I guess our SOAR platform includes SIM functionality. And so, what I will say is we are purely a SOAR vendor providing the best SOAR in the business. We really believe that. So Pierre, I'll let you answer that question about whether we have SIM functionality, but also I think you should segue into how we work with some of the SIM vendors and why it's advantageous to actually use our SOAR with anybody's SIM.
Yeah, so the short answer to your question is we don't do log analytics. Well, I mean, that's not what SOAR is built for. SIM is built to do that extremely well. And so we highly recommend our customers have a SIM as well as a SOAR. What a SOAR, like a vendor agnostic SOAR, does really well is it aggregates alerts from different tools. So your SIM may not be your own detection platform. You may have your NDR, your EDR. You may have email security, unusual behavior, and analytics alerts. And so bringing them all together inside of the SOAR tool helps automate your incident response process. And not many SIM tools have like a playbook engine or a playbook builder. Some do, but those are typically the kind of platform plays. But again, if you want to maintain the best in class, you want to maintain the best that there are for your particular environment, then having a vendor neutral SOAR is really important for that because it's non-biased to what tools you're already working with, and it gives you that kind of consolidation and those platform benefits without having to compromise the specific tools that you or your customers need.
Yeah, and I just want to add a distinction there. It's not that we recommend you have a SIM and a SOAR. Like we have customers that they're doing most of their alerting in EDR, and that's coming into D3. They might not have a SIM, and we see that a lot. But we SIM integrations are some of our integrations that we had when we were first starting out. So we have a lot of experience with Splunk, Logarithm, Microsoft, really any SIM on the market we've encountered, have customers using, and are definitely some of our most important integrations and most fully functional partnerships. So I think that's
Yeah,
a
and
good question to address.
I will add to that is a unique use case between SIM and D3 is bidirectional sync. And so this could be for MSSPs that their clients may be using a SIM and they're using D3 or another SOAR. What they need is for any changes made to the ticket inside of the SIM to be reflected in the ticket inside of the SOAR and vice versa. So your teams aren't crossing over and working on each other's tickets. And so we're the first SOAR company to publish a solution to this problem, both for SIMs and ITSM tools. And so if you're interested in that, you can look at our blog, search in bidirectional sync. You'll see kind of a breakdown of one that we built with Microsoft Sentinel as an example.
Thanks, Pierre. Okay, there's only a few questions left. So there's a question about how we handle false positives, and then a follow-up about how we handle false negatives.
Interesting. How do we handle false negatives?
Yeah.
So false negatives are typically seen or detected after the fact. It's not something that I've looked into too much, to be frank. So whoever asked that, I'll follow up with you after the webinar.
Okay. Thanks, Pierre. And I know there was one additional question that we didn't address. Where is it here? So the question here, I maybe you'll understand it. I might need some additional context, and if that's the case, Pierre, just ask. Are there integrations to work with an existing security stack?
Yeah, I may need more context on that. But I guess what I can say off the bat is we have over 400 out of the box integrations. So yeah, I mean, you name it would probably have an out of the box playbook for it to assist with whatever existing security tools you're using. If we don't have one and that tool has, API docs available, then we can definitely build one for you. I hope that answered the question. If not, just feel free to add some more context in the chat.
Yeah, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We've got 2 minutes left. I will wait a minute. We'll wait till 10:45 a.m. Pacific time for any last questions. I will say that yes, the recording will be made available within 24 hours. We'll send it to everybody who attended and everybody who signed up and wasn't able to attend. They'll all receive a recorded link so you could share internally. And if you do have any questions, that you didn't ask or you want more clarification on, you can reach Pierre and myself at marketing@d3security.com. And we'll obviously love to include our accounts team for any sales inquiries. But yeah, if there's any questions about any of the content Pierre went over, if you'd like a copy of In the Wild 2024 PDF report, we can definitely provide that. And yeah, it looks like there are no more questions. So I want to thank everybody for their time, and look forward to hosting the next webinar. And I'm sure you will all receive an invite to it. So thanks, Pierre. Thanks to our attendees, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.